As a kid, what I loved was the rush of being on stage. I just loved the feeling of getting out there by myself and feeling like the man in the arena. And there's just a big black piano on the stage, and you can't even see anybody, but you know that there's 500 people behind the lights. And then like that moment before you play, you sit down, you put your hands in your lap, and you just wait for the audience to settle. And then it's dead quiet. And then you do something with that moment, and you give people this gift, and you take them on this beautiful oral journey. That's incredible. You know, I live for those few and far between moments where you would feel like I have this group of people in the palm of my hand. And that's what I loved as a kid.
Welcome to the Calgary Sessions. This is episode number 123. I always forget sometimes, so anyways, I got to focus. I'm your host, Jeff Humphreys. Before we get into it today, I'm asking people, if you listen or like the show, please subscribe and leave me a little review or a star. 5 stars is better than 4 stars, so that'd be awesome. Today's guest, this is a hookup through our mutual good friend, Mr. Tyler Sloan. So Sloaner, thanks for teeing this up. I'm pumped to get into this one. This guest has an amazing name, so that's just the tip of the iceberg. So please name and who you are.
My name's Jeff Neufeld. I work in metal construction manufacturing.
Amazing. So these, like we talked off camera, right? Like there's so many, the story that got you to where you are right now is fascinating because, you know, when you introduce yourself like that, you're like, okay, like now what? But it'll be, this will be a cool one to walk through.
I still don't know how to answer that basic question, you know, who you are.
Why is that?
Well, I grew up in such a different world than where I am now.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, the short story is...
No, we're going long once we get there.
You know, so I was good at playing the piano as a child, had an opportunity to play professionally all over the world, and that was wonderful until it wasn't. Mm-hmm. And then I got into business, and, you know, so I grew up in a world of being at times a concert pianist in a tuxedo, mm-hmm. playing concertos with orchestras at 8 p.m. And then that sort of ran its course, or I ran out of opportunity, or, you know, hard to say what all happened mm-hmm. there. But in any event, it came to an end. And, you know, then I got to a point in my early 30s of like, okay, what am I going to do next?
Mm-hmm. Part 2.
Yep.
Do you think the who I am question, is there, like when you introduce yourself at a cocktail party?
Yeah.
What do you say?
It's usually easiest to just say I work in manufacturing.
Yeah. And then people just like, okay.
Yeah. It's like saying you work in insurance. You know, yes. as soon as I say, you know, I'm a retired concert pianist and mm-hmm. I work in manufacturing, mm-hmm. then the focus turns to me.
Yeah, for sure.
And, you know, I feel like I had a little bit of time in the sun or the spotlight. Mm-hmm. That was lovely. Mm-hmm. I absolutely loved that at the time and wanted way more than I ever got. Mm-hmm. But I also feel like I've had my time, and now my life is about helping and serving others through the work that I'm doing. I don't need to be in the spotlight ever again.
Amazing. Well, you checked out the Sloan show recently, so you have a loose idea of what's about to happen. So I would love for you to take it back, you know, as far as you want to go. Some people go back to like just those early memories, you know. Some people go back to kindergarten, some go to junior highs. Take it back as far as you want to go. So, you know, who inspired you? What inspired you? What you were up to as a youngster? And then I'll drag you along, and we'll go from piano to manufacturing all in X amount of time.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I really enjoyed listening to the conversation with Sloaner, and I appreciated the opportunity that you've given me to think about this. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about the past, and it was nice as I prepared, you know, my thoughts to have some focused conversation today. it was nice to take the opportunity to look back on where I come from and everything that's happened. My dad, both my parents had a huge role in what I've managed to accomplish over the years. But my dad was a blind commodity trader. My dad, the year that I was conceived, was diagnosed with an eye disease and was told that he would be blind within 2 years. You know, imagine being a 40-year-old man with 2 young kids already and a third on the way, and he was a commodity trader, which at the time was and probably still is, a very visually oriented profession. And he was told that he would be blind and unable to work within 2 years. Fortunately, it took a little longer. And so he was able to transition to being an investment advisor with the help of others to read to him. I was one of those people that read to him all of the publications and all of the data and information that he needed to consume to do his job as an investment advisor.
Wow.
And so as a child, you know, I guess the other key detail is I was decent at playing the piano. And it became apparent over the years that that could be a profession for me, that would be available to me if I would be willing to put in the work to do it.
Yep. Where does that come from? Like, where your dad's working in that field. Where does the art side fit into your world? Like, how does the piano show up in your world?
Well, my mom was a huge lover of, both my parents were huge lovers of classical music. They took me to the Winnipeg Symphony Orchestra. You know, in my memory, I'm sure it wasn't this often, but in my memory, we went every Saturday. And my parents, and especially my dad, would take me backstage to meet the guest artist. I met all kinds of big names at that time.
Cool.
And, you know, classical music is a world where you can just bumble through the backstage door and go meet people. There isn't a paparazzi or anything of that nature.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you want to go backstage and meet Marek Jablonski or David Oistrakh after their performance, you can just go do that. And so I met all these famous people and well-known people, at least in my world. And then I had opportunities to take lessons with them and master classes at this program that I was in that was out at the University of Manitoba that was called the Gifted Youth Program.
Amazing.
And
did you pick it up early?
Yeah, I did. I started when I was a little kid. I was, I think, 4 when I started lessons with a next-door piano teacher. Both my brothers played, and
older brothers?
My older brothers, yeah.
Okay.
And I just liked it. I just liked it.
Was as a youngster, was there anything else that, like, at a young age, you kind of figured something out that you liked? Was there anything else around you that was interesting back then?
I liked everything.
Yeah.
You know, I loved sports. I've always loved reading. I've always been a person that's been decent at many things, but not that great at much. You know, I think the polite word for that now is generalist. It's a kinder way of saying not very outstanding at anything in particular.
Yeah.
And I was like that with, you know, most sports I'm decent, but I was never going to be pro. But music, you know, and much the same. Like I was pretty good as a kid, and I won a few things, but it wasn't like I dominated everything and then went pro at it. I played in local festivals, and I won some and I lost some. Then I had a chance to compete at a national level and then international. And I had chances to, I remember the first time I went over to Europe to compete and play in a festival, I felt like I got my ass handed to me. It was embarrassing. And I came back, and my teacher at the time said, okay, now you know what the international standard is. You know, do you want to try and get there?
Yeah.
Or is this the end of the road for you? And I was about 20, I think, the first time that I played internationally. And I thought, you know, I think I could do that if I worked a little harder and a little more diligently and intentionally.
When you're a youngster, does piano is it just kind of there? Like, you know, elementary, junior high, you're taking lessons. It's like, is it just like living, and no disrespect, the average life, you know, you're just kind of doing your thing. Music is there, this this craft is there? Or is it does it start getting ratcheted up at some point just based on interest and skill?
It got ratcheted up quickly based on interest and skill. Like my routine as a child was basically go home from school at 3 or 4, practice for 2 or 3 hours, have dinner with the family, and then read to dad and go to bed. By about grade 7, I had to make a choice between music and sport. I really loved volleyball and basketball in particular. I was pretty good at it. Not as good as my brother, who ended up involved in things like Canada Games and being invited to the Olympic program and that sort of thing. So I like to think if I'd carried on, maybe I would have too. But of course, that can't be known. Probably isn't true. So apologies to Tom for pretending that I might have been. But I did choose music because I loved it. And then when I was in grade 10, I suffered a prolapse disc. And so what happened was I had a disc in my lower spine that bulged out and caused some nerve pinching and basically handicapped me for the foreseeable future. So I couldn't walk very well. I couldn't stand up. I couldn't sit for very long at a time. And I couldn't go to school. And so I was stuck at home. And I had this piano exam coming up. And I had nothing to do. And so I just kept practicing as much as I could every day. And so I sort of went from, maybe 2 or 3 hours of practicing to 4 or 5 over the course of the day. And it was sort of like wake up at 7, eat your eggs, practice for half an hour, and then lie down and recover. And then practice for another half an hour, lie down and recover, take a nap, keep going. So it was just practice for about 3 months while I waited for surgery to get this prolapse disc removed and my spine fused. And at the end of that, I did this examination, and I got the top mark in the country for it. And when I got that news, I was in the hospital recovering from my back surgery. And so then my teacher came to me and said, if you could accomplish this with a prolapse disc, like imagine what you might do if you just worked this diligently all the time. You could really go far with this.
That there's 2 things that got my attention. That you kind of master something in a time of pain, essentially, right? Which is kind of without having this back problem,
Isn't that interesting? Yeah.
There's no way you would have spent that time. You wouldn't have had the time to do all that.
That's right. And then sport wasn't an option. And so any debate about should I or shouldn't I have chosen this path became very clear. I mean, at first I was told that I shouldn't even run because it might dislodge the fusing and, I might be paralyzed and scary things like that.
Yeah.
So it was really easy to focus on music after that. It felt like it was my only option.
Did those 3 months when you're kind of, bedridden-ish, up, down, does it... do you remember what you were thinking about? Like what went through your mind back then? Were you kind of were you sad? Were you accepting? Were you just focused on this craft that allowed you to persevere?
That's a really interesting question I've never thought about because, if I was asking you that question, I would expect you to say you were scared or depressed or you felt sorry for yourself. And as I think back on that, I felt none of those things. It just was. And I think that probably came from my dad. Yes. I mean, he went blind and it just was. He never felt sorry for himself for 1 second. It was all about adaptation. And it makes me think of years later as I was trying to figure out my next career after music. Somebody gave me this great book called Deep Survival by a guy named, I think it's Lawrence Gonzalez. He's a National Geographic writer. Cool. That he writes this book. It's a collection of stories of when shit goes sideways in the wild, who lives and who dies and why. he tells this story in particular of these 4 people that are in a boat. Boat sinks, and now 4 people are in a raft in the middle of the ocean, and they're trying to figure out how to survive. 2 of them start saying things like, we better start collecting water. They start adapting right away to the new circumstances. The other 2 start saying things like, wasn't it great when we were sitting on the Lido deck a few days ago drinking margaritas? You know, I sure hope that a ship comes by and rescues us. And eventually they get so delusional with these I wish type thoughts that one of them actually stands up and says, fuck this, I'm going to 7-Eleven for cigarettes. He steps off the dinghy, falls into the ocean, and is consumed by sharks and dies. So the lesson is, one of the hallmarks of people who survive when things go wild are the fast adapters. And I look at my dad, and I mean, he was all about adapting when he got that diagnosis. He didn't spend any time thinking, I sure wish I wasn't going blind, or maybe I won't.
Yeah. It's the perfect segue. That was the other piece I want to touch on. Like the idea of reading to your dad nightly, like it just seems like a very unique experience.
Well, absolutely. And gave me an accidental and wonderfully comprehensive overview, at least, of the world of investing. You know, so I got this great education. And, you know, what happened there was when I was in about grade 8, I played my first professional recital and, you know, got a little check for $1,000. And my dad sat me down and said, you know, here's what that would be worth if you invested it wisely in 50 years. And if you could do that consistently with some percentage of your earnings, you know, you'd stand a chance of not being a destitute musician. And so that kind of became the goal, was to save as much as I could of whatever I was fortunate to earn playing, and put that into public markets and investments for the future.
So amazing.
And, you know, like how fortunate was that my dad educated me about the time value of money. And then, of course, he managed those funds for the first 10 or so years. And then when I was about 25, he said, okay, it's time for you to take this over and do this for yourself. And so I sort of lived what felt like a bit of a double life, where I was, you know, paying attention to public markets and investing the very small savings that I had accumulated, and then working professionally as a pianist. You know, doing things like playing with orchestras, teaching at a couple of universities, administrating arts organizations, and, you know, just making a life in professional music.
It's, that relationship with your dad is like, when he went blind, was there much discussion around the house about anything? Like things changing or what to expect?
You'd think there would have. You'd think there would have.
I don't.
But he just did it. And it was almost an elephant in the room.
Yeah.
You know, like if we don't talk about it too much, maybe it's not there, I think was the mindset. Or like, it doesn't matter. It just is.
Yeah.
Life moves on. Like we can't sit around feeling sorry for ourselves. Get to work. Like my dad was very action oriented and spent, with me at least, very little time talking about his feelings or speaking philosophically or anything of that nature. It was like, okay, what needs to be done now to advance our lives? You know, and if that is check the price of copper, then that's what you do next. You know, don't worry about your goal 20 years from now. Just do what needs to be done today. Take action.
When did you get to a certain age where you can look back on those years? Like when you said it was, you know, when you're thinking about yourself getting through something, you know, like that transition of stopping being a professional pianist and, you know, like, and thinking about your dad and like, there's just one option. It's just like move forward. When did you realize the things you were learning? Was it later in life when you can actually go back and connect those dots?
Yeah, I would say when I was trying to figure out what to do after music, then I started thinking about those things because I needed to understand how I might apply what I had learned to something else. Up until that moment in my early 30s, it was all about becoming the very best pianist that I could be. And I didn't ever think about anything else. You mentioned about Katrina LeMay Doan talking about how scary it is to wake up and view yourself as something else. I totally relate to that. I viewed myself as the only thing that I could do is, like, if you need somebody to play the Grieg Concerto on Saturday night at 8 p.m. in a tuxedo with the Calgary Philharmonic, I can do that. But that's it.
Frightening.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on. Yeah, that's very singular.
Yeah. So, yeah, I didn't start thinking about, the lessons learned and what else I might be able to do until I started needing to think about what else I might need to do.
Which is really interesting, right? There's all these, I have similar experiences, but there's all these lessons as a youngster.
Yeah.
You're in the moment, you don't really know what's happening. But then all of a sudden, whatever it is, 20, 30 years down the road, you're like, okay, this is why I can handle these situations.
Yeah.
It's because of all that.
Yeah.
And at the time, there's no way, I don't think a parent would sit you down and be like, listen,
yeah,
here's what you're learning right now, because it wouldn't stick.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was the foundation of a lot of things that allow you to move the way you move right now.
Absolutely. I mean, now I feel like it was the very best possible education I could have ever had for what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
And on the surface, it looks like everything that I did up until I was 34 was irrelevant to what I do now.
Yeah. So swing me back to the high school years. What's going on back then? And this is all in Winnipeg?
This is all in Winnipeg.
Okay.
I was pretty focused on music at that time.
All classical?
All classical.
There's no weird high school band that was playing shitty rock and roll or...
No, I didn't. I did one stint with some buddies that started a little cover band and wanted a keyboard player, and that just wasn't for me. I tried jazz. That wasn't for me.
Talent shows?
I liked... Oh, yeah. I always got up there. I was always the token classical musician and played at every year-end concert and, talent shows and that kind of thing. And, it'd sort of be like Dance Monkey and get up there and play something, play something sentimental and play something fast and technically impressive and get out.
and was it intimidating to get up on stages back then? Or did
I loved it. That was what I liked the most. I mean, later on, I fell in love with the craft of getting better as a pianist. But as a kid, what I loved was the rush of being on stage. I just loved the feeling of getting out there by myself and feeling like the man in the arena. Where I would get out there and there's just a big black piano on the stage and you can't even see anybody, but you know that there's 500 people behind the lights and you don't say anything. You just smile and you bow and you sit down. And then that moment before you play, I just can't tell you what that's what I lived for. You sit down, you're quiet, you put your hands in your lap and you just wait for the audience to settle. And then it's dead quiet. And then you do something with that moment and you give people this gift of either, sentiment or joy or an energy of some sort. And you take them on this beautiful oral journey. That's incredible. I live for those few and far between moments where you would feel like I have this group of people in the palm of my hand and I can do anything. I can lift them up, or I can crush their spirit, you know, or whatever it is that you have there. And that's what I loved as a kid.
When that like confidence and excitement, like right before, like right when the crowd settles.
Yeah.
So when you're not on stage, were you a confident kid? Like, were you walking like upright and into rooms, or were you quiet in the background?
I don't think so. I didn't feel that way, at least. You know, I felt like an awkward nerd. You know, I remember struggling with eye contact, chit chat. You know, I still feel like I'm not sure what to say, you know, unless there's an agenda, you know. And
some guy's interviewing me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You know, I always sort of feel like what I really want to say is like, please state the purpose of this conversation. Like, can we just cut to the chase? Yeah.
It's interesting though, right? Like this, because a lot of people would like wilt on stage.
Right.
You know, that would be the duality of it. They'd be this like, whatever, and then they get on stage and shut down. But it's interesting that you kind of live for that moment. Yeah,
I just always knew what to do on a stage, and I mean, I was well trained in that. You know, I had some wonderful experienced performers as a kid that told me how to handle those nerves, how to channel them, how to accept them, how to use them to drive you, and you know, they told me to expect, like, it's human nature that when you are about to step onto a stage and take that risk, you know, sometimes you throw up. You know, like, that's human nature. It's understandable that you'd be a little terrified of that experience. But if you can simply accept that as part of the journey, part of the price of admission, you know, then you're like almost bulletproof. You know, then you look forward to that, and you're standing backstage, and it's a big show, and you kind of got the trash bucket beside you, and you're thinking, okay, like, giddy up.
Here we go.
Now's my time to shine. And then you use that. You get on stage, and you're smiling because you're laughing at yourself, because you know that you just threw up backstage, and what the audience sees is, you know, this confident, happy to be there performer. And that just primes them to love you, and you sit down and deliver.
There you go.
Yeah.
So coming out of high school, what's got your attention besides, is this all consuming? You know, is it 7 days a week? Is it practicing and performing and testing? Like, is it kind of all consuming through those years coming out?
Sure felt like it was. I graduated from high school. I was 17. My parents felt that I was not ready to leave home, so I did another year in Winnipeg, where I basically competed and practiced and performed. I took some minor theory courses at a local junior college, probably somebody else's idea to just keep me busy. I don't remember taking any of that seriously or doing any academic work. I was all about playing. And then I got a scholarship to go to the University of Alberta to study with a prominent concert pianist by the name of Marek Jablonski. And a huge part of becoming a concert pianist is working with someone that has done it. And you do these master classes constantly, where you play, and then the experienced maestro will sit down at a piano, often right beside you. There's like 2 grand pianos side by side, sometimes on a stage, sometimes just in a studio. And the maestro sits down and says, the opening section, I think it's more like this. And he plays it, and then you imitate what he or she has just done. And that's sort of how you learn. So Marek Jablonski was somebody that I had the opportunity to do quite a bit of that with as a child and as a teenager. And so when he took this job teaching at the University of Alberta, I had an opportunity to go there instead of going to, he was at the Peabody Conservatory in Baltimore, which is the better name school.
Yep.
But you go to school for the teacher, and he had moved to the U of A. So great. I was able to get a scholarship and go train with a really big name at a smaller school.
What's the
Make some progress.
Music program? Like, what is it? Like
That's right. So
it's like a
so all of
a
my
degree, or what is it?
all my formal education is degrees in music.
Wow.
So I have a Bachelor of Music and a Master's of Music and a few performance diplomas from some places in Europe. But yeah, I have degrees from the University of Alberta and then the Rice University in Houston, Texas.
Did you, at that age, when you're, I'm sure your friends were doing whatever, some were working, some were going to post-secondary.
Yeah.
You're going down this like way in on music.
Yeah.
Did you have could you see where you were going to go? Did you have an idea of what this looked like when you're going to school to get music degrees? What is it? Did you have a clear path of what it was going to give you?
Well, I did. And as wildly ambitious as it may sound, I truly believed that the only possible path for me was to get to a level where the only thing that I did was play solo recitals and concertos with orchestras. I later discovered that there are a handful of people in the world that are good enough and have developed enough of a reputation that that's all they do.
Can you relate that to sport?
Yeah.
So like, for me, and if you, whatever sport you want to reference, just like walk me through what that percentage actually looks like.
Well, it's kind of like hockey. There's a few hundred people that play at the very highest level, and that's all they do. Then there's people that are in the minor leagues and, are making 60 grand a year to play in the ECHL. Then there's a host of people that have some sort of combination where they, maybe they play senior men's for a while. They also coach, and eventually they become general managers or agents or trainers or something to stay in the game of hockey. And music is a lot like that. I played professionally at the highest level, maybe, maybe call it parts of 5 seasons. And, I guess I could probably point to maybe 100 games in the NHL of classical music. And then a whole lot of years bumbling around the minors and coaching, which is, I took a couple of jobs at universities. I had a chance to teach at the University of Indiana at IUPUI. I had a chance to teach a year at the University of Manitoba. I discovered that was not for me and was a really resentful, unproductive asshole at both of those institutions. And, apologies to those that were kind enough to hire me at the time. I certainly needed the job, but that didn't mean that I wanted to do it. So that didn't work out very well, not surprisingly.
That, so when you're in university, you have this like very clear goal. I want to be this pro. Is everything else just like fall to the wayside? Is this very singular, driven, focused?
Absolutely.
And uncomfortable? Or was it?
It was just all I wanted to do. I changed cities. I broke up with girlfriends. I didn't go on family trips. It was all about music and opportunity and the next thing, and there was always the possibility that somebody might call me at the last minute to sub for someone that had canceled, and you want to be ready for that phone call, so if you get called up, you're ready to go. No strings or obligations elsewhere. So I didn't take any other jobs that required me to, be in a certain place at a certain time because I might need to go play a concert.
Amazing. Good segue. Were you working? Were you a working musician coming through university, or was there other hustles on the go?
Yeah, I was. I had, I was very fortunate about scholarships. Generally, I had scholarships that left a little money in my pocket for living expenses.
Yep.
And then I would play whatever concerts I could. Played an awful lot of small towns in Canada at the local Anglican church that has a Wednesday afternoon concert. Had the chance to play with a number of the orchestras. Then I got to the United States, played quite a bit there. I had a chance to go play a tour of Atlantic Canada. Went over to Europe. I think the first time that I went there, I played in Austria at the Mozarteum, which is in Salzburg. That's the home of Mozart.
All of it.
Yep.
Amazing.
Got to play there. I got to play at St. Martin in the Fields in London, which is a really big deal. I got to play at the Flaine Summer Festival in France. Some really, what to me was meaningful and big time work.
Is it when you graduate?
Yeah.
Is it? Are you comfortable or are you uncomfortable? Of like, what? Like, are you confident that there's going to be opportunities that show up, or are you a lost human?
Bit of both.
Yeah.
Bit of both. And it sort of went in fits and starts. I would win a contest. Typically, when you win a contest, you either get a little bit of money or some concerts or a tour or something of that nature.
Yep.
And you certainly get a huge confidence boost.
What are these? Walk me through one of these contests. What they actually look like.
Well,
you go to the Jube. They go to the Jube and like set up on stage, and there's a panel of just judges.
Yep.
And that's it. And then you play your piece, and they just.
Yep. Sometimes there's an audience, sometimes there isn't. There's usually a few different rounds. So, sometimes you play a round by yourself, which is called a solo recital. Then you might play a round playing chamber music with, so you'd play a piece of music for piano, cello, and violin. And then in the last round, you would play a concerto or appear as the soloist with an orchestra. And generally, there's an audience for those bigger ones. And then there's a jury of 5 prominent musicians generally, or a critic or somebody of that nature, who evaluates it and decides who the winner is. And then you get a little prize. And when it goes well, you feel great. When you don't lose, like it's like figure skating, right? There's a lot of touch and feel to it.
Yeah.
And it's kind of hard to say why you've picked the winner that you have or haven't. So it's tough. I remember the first time that I entered a significant competition, they had 5 finalists, of which I was one of them. I thought I played really well, and when they went to make the announcement, they awarded prizes verbally to 4 of the finalists and just never said my name. And I was so bitter about that they later put up a little announcement sheet on the door of the auditorium, and I went back later that night. The announcement listed everybody's name and their prize, and then I was just not on that. And I made a little handwritten note in the middle of the night that said, Jeff Neufeld also participated. And I went and stapled it to it. I was just livid with this. Just livid about it.
Do you, this has been an interesting thread lately in some of these conversations. The idea of, like, especially business owners right now, that came through sport or art or whatever, but it's the amount of losses that are put up.
Yeah.
And that at that time you're livid.
Yeah.
But it's very rare to win in anything.
Oh, absolutely.
Whether it's business, sport, art, music, whatever, right?
This is the thing.
But you can't really teach that though, right? You have to experience it, and then all of a sudden when you're in a spot, you have something to pull from. Like the swings aren't as deep and high.
Yeah.
Because you've experienced all these losses.
Yeah.
And it's as you're talking about this, I'm like, yeah, these losses, there must have been a lot of them.
Oh, absolutely. Way more losses and disappointments and failures than, there were any gold medal moments,
And how has that helped where you are?
Well, it's made me much more resilient.
Yeah.
I don't, I kind of have a bit of a routine now when I suffer a loss. I know what to do, and I let myself feel what I feel.
Yep.
And I know that it's going to pass.
Yep.
I know about things like call a friend or go to the gym, or get some sleep. I didn't know about that back then.
Yeah.
And so it was devastating.
Mm-hmm.
And, I know that the sun comes up tomorrow, and it'll be okay. Tomorrow will be another chance to make some progress on whatever needs to be done today.
Yeah, I'm really fascinated by the losses. Like, it's just something that I'm just really into right now, because there's so many lessons, so many takeaways from those moments. And I think if you don't put yourself in those situations to go after the wins or losses, you're missing out on a lot of tangible, I don't want to say life lessons, but like
absolutely
experiences.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And it goes on, like you have to accept that if you're going to enjoy life. That's the whole journey, is learning to accept that and almost look for it and learn to see the opportunity instead of seeing it as failure.
Yeah.
Like it reminds me of Edison talking about I found 200 some odd ways to make not to make a light bulb. And I'd say much the same. I found an awful lot of ways to fail at playing the piano and fail in business. But eventually, and so now I accept that, and I expect it, and I'm always looking for, not always immediately, but once I sort of accept that something has not gone my way, then I can fairly quickly and efficiently turn around and say, okay, what can I learn from this to be better for the next time?
That snapback is quicker.
Yeah.
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 So you're done university, playing around. So what does your life look like after you're chasing this pro goal?
Well, there were some great moments, like flying to London to play at St. Martin in the Fields.
What is that place?
Presented. So it's an old church that dates to I think the 1600s. It's on Trafalgar Square. Right next to it is one of the big art museums, Canada House, where the embassy is. I think across the square or down the street. I remember that because they played a role in, the embassy played a role in presenting the concert that I went and gave, and then they had a reception for us afterwards. Show was packed, went really well, and it was a gold medal moment. It felt like, I have made it. Like I'm riding around in the tube.
Yep.
As a concert pianist. I got my music over my shoulder. I got a tuxedo and a bag beside me, and there's all these cool people doing big things, and I am one of them. And
how old are you in this moment?
I was probably 28 or 9 when I played there.
Yep. It was a thing. Like it was
Absolutely.
one of those like you said it best, gold medal spot.
Yep. And so I did that. That same fall, I was invited to do a tour of Venezuela. So I went and did that. That all went very well from an artistic standpoint. Then I got back to Calgary.
How'd you get here, by the way?
Well, I married a girl from Calgary.
Okay. Met at school? Or like?
I met her at Rice University in Houston. And we came here in the summer of 2004 to help her parents because their house had flooded. Would have been more like 2001 or 2.
Okay.
And then at some point thereafter decided to live here. But anyway, I what I was going to say is I came back from these experiences of feeling like I've really made it to coming back and accepting a gig to play background music for an oil and gas company 5 nights in a row at the BMO Center, on a shitty keyboard, playing background music for a bunch of money while people talk. And, having the, a D- moment of sitting there, resentfully playing this background music, thinking to myself, like, do you people know who I am? Like not healthy thinking.
Yeah. Yeah. And how do you manage that?
Well, very poorly. Very poorly. Those were really tough months before we figured out, we being Brenna and I, my wife, what we were going to do next. I didn't handle that time very well.
It's a long way, right? To go from this gold medal high to that experience.
Yeah.
Like, listen, I DJ'd for a while. And when I played, when you played in a room that to your point, you kind of had them in the palm of your hands.
Yeah.
And that feeling, right? It's way, way different. And then you book a gig because you need the money, it sounds interesting, and you're in the background playing music and they don't like this music.
Yep.
It's soul crushing.
Yep.
Like,
yep.
You question a lot of things. If it's a 4-hour set, you question a lot of things in your life.
Yep.
And especially when your peers are out there buying houses, getting married, having kids, and.
Yeah.
Like it's
a
spot.
Yep. Is it ever?
How long did it take for you guys to come up with a plan? It's hard. It's hard to well, I don't want to speak for you, but to have that kind of energy and dedication towards your craft.
Well, my wife played a huge role in helping us to do something different. I had not accepted new reality at that point whatsoever. I was a pianist in a tuxedo. That's what I do. She had this great idea at some point, probably 6 months into this. She kept saying, Jeff, like, we got to do something different. You got to be willing to do something different. Like, a little bit about investing. Would you try applying? Like, just go be somebody's assistant, get your certification, think about it. And she ended up doing that. And then she had a great idea that really turned things around. We went to an industrial psychologist who did what was called strong skills inventory testing. So we did a couple of days of writing these tests that were designed to assess all kinds of aptitudes. So our aptitude for management, our aptitude for mechanical objects and reasoning, our mathematical abilities, logic, grammar, and then interests. They asked really intriguing questions like, would you rather sit at the top of a mountain or in a submarine? I had no idea what was coming, but when we sat down after doing all these tests, this industrial psychologist sat down with what appeared to me to be a bar graph of all of the data that they had compiled. And he started describing who I was, what I would be interested in. And it was incredible. You know, it was like he had known me my whole life. And when he got to the end of describing what he thought the data showed I would be interested in and good at, he said, you know, if you agree with the way that I've described you, the following 5 professions would be the best for you to choose from.
Whoa. Who is this man?
Exactly.
Wow.
Yeah.
How did...
He was an industrial psychologist is the answer, right? A database scientist rather than somebody that was talking about our feelings like a career counselor or something of that nature.
Were you hesitant to go down this path with him? Or were you at a point where you're just like, I got to do something?
I was desperate to do something. You know, like it was, I don't remember what we paid, but I do remember that it was a god-awful sum of money that we did not have at that time. But we did it anyways because we were desperate. And then, you know, the test suggested 5 different professions.
Do you remember them?
Yep. One was law. Yep. I was 31 or so at the time, and I thought, well, I'm going to be some 25-year-old partner's bitch if I go into law, even if I'm willing to go to school. I don't want to do that. One was HR. And I didn't really know anybody in HR that seemed to like their life, so I didn't really consider that.
Yep.
Another one was anything to do with food, and I certainly was attracted to things like food distribution, but I didn't see that would result in any more economic stability than we already had. And that was certainly part of the goal of looking at other professions.
Yep.
And then small business and entrepreneurship. And, you know, the industrial psychologist helped me to understand that I already was running a small business. It was just a very niche-focused, obscure, challenging, small market business. And if I could get my head around the notion of simply running a different small business, one where maybe there's a bigger market or it's a product that is actually needed or it helps people make money, then I might stand a chance of creating a little more stability for myself.
Wow.
Yeah.
When you get those results, what's that feeling? Like, is it joy? Is it like tears? Is it just like more data that's confusing you? Like,
it was all of that.
Yeah.
You know, but what I can tell you is up until that moment, I viewed myself as a failed pianist in a bathrobe on a Tuesday morning at 9 a.m., unsure of what to do. After that, at least I had a plan. And I mean, Jeff, I would do things like get that written. He later wrote out a report describing everything that he had said. I still have that report.
Amazing.
At the time, I would read that in the morning to give myself the courage to take some sort of action that day, you know, and it said things like, here's where you test in a comparison of intellect with the average Canadian. Here's how you rate as being inclined and suited towards entrepreneurship compared to the average Canadian. And it was like, okay, well, the data tells me that I can do this. Doesn't feel like I can, but, you know, I didn't think I could make it as a concert pianist either, and I got to do some pretty amazing things. And, you know, I didn't turn into Sidney Crosby, but I sure got to play at the highest level for my 100 games.
Mm-hmm.
So if I could do that, maybe I can figure out something else.
How long did those bathrobe Tuesdays last before you kind of found your stride?
I felt sorry for myself for a good 6 months.
Yeah.
And, then it was like, I remember at that time, my wife took some work playing we just needed revenue. She took some work playing for a Disney show, which is really great work from a compensation standpoint. But you travel around on a bus playing in the pit orchestra for 101 Dalmatians for 3 months at a time.
Work.
Yeah. So she was away doing that, and she got a certification to work in retail finance called the Canadian Securities Course. And then she started applying for jobs, and it got a little tense between us because I was still diligently practicing every day and talking a lot about what I might do next, but I hadn't done anything. And then it just kind of became clear that I needed to start doing something else. So John, the industrial psychologist, and Brenna helped me to get into action. I went and saw a guy who had bought a small business in town, talked to him about how he had done that. And essentially he'd called accountants and lawyers and simply asked them, do you know a guy that owns a small business that doesn't have an exit strategy that I could buy? And so I started picking up the phone, and I made some rules for myself, like you have to call 5 accountants before 10 a.m. And I would just call them and say, hey, my name's Jeff. I'm a young entrepreneur trying to buy a business. Do you know anybody that has a decent business that they might like to sell?
That's a spot.
Isn't it?
Like, just to know that there's some direction, but not a lot of direction. Like, there's, I should be an entrepreneur, but it's a wide field to go down.
Yeah.
How long did that last? How many,
I'd say, I did it to varying degrees. At first I still had some work, and, so I would sort of make an effort over a few weeks and months to try to buy a business and look at some deal and get close and then decide not to. And then I would go and play some concerts and feel like, maybe the dream's going to work out and I'm not going to have to do something else. And then I would come back to it. But it was probably 2 years of pretty focused attention to it. And I developed a little network of accountants and lawyers that specialized in small business, and they would let me call them, once a month or once a quarter. And one day I called this accountant that I'd been calling for a long time and knew pretty well. And, I said, hey, it's me calling again, have you got anybody? And he said, well, actually, I was just talking with a guy yesterday that was planning to sell his business to an employee, and the employee just told him that he's not going to do the deal. And he said, it's a nice little business. It manufactures flashing, and I think you should go and look at it. I had no idea what flashing was. I didn't think anything was manufactured in North America anymore. I really just went there as a courtesy to that accountant so that he would keep sending me leads.
Yep.
And I went out there and I looked at the equipment and I looked at the financials. They were quite compelling. And as I was driving home, now that I knew what flashing was, I noticed it was on every single building. And then I looked into who makes flashing, and I discovered, there isn't really an Amazon of flashing. It's a pretty disorganized mom and pop type area. But it's needed. It's on every single building. And I thought, okay, well, I can get my head around this. And I had the experience when I was 11, 12, and 13. I went out in the summer to an uncle's farm in Wainwright, Alberta, and I worked on the farm for a month every summer. Took the train out and worked on the farm and took the train home. And I just loved that. I loved the smell of diesel. I loved how tangible it was, to replace the tines on a swather or something like that. It was so measurable to see the progress that you'd made at the end of the day. And I thought about that when I went into this little facility that made flashing, like I smelt, the truck must have driven by or something, and I smelt diesel, and I thought of being on the farm, and I thought, I like tangible stuff. It'd be amazing. Like I had really had enough of trying to figure out what the value of performing the Grieg Concerto was in the world. And to me, it just made sense to look at trying to figure out, can you buy a piece of metal for $1 and bend it a few times and sell it for $2 and do enough of that to pay your bills and make a life.
Fascinating. Like, of all, like, again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like a bumpy ride.
Yes.
Understatement based on that reaction, but like, it's ugly to get to where you are, but it takes a lot of work to like figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the funny thing, Jeff, is you get there, and the moment that deal closed, everything that I had learned so far was irrelevant, because running a business is a very, very different profession than investing in a business. I didn't even know the right words to use to describe the products to anybody. I didn't know the jargon. I didn't know the semantics.
So what do you do? What's your move? What's your move when you sign that line?
Well, what did I do? I think it was then that I started thinking, what can I use from my time in music? And what is the thing that got me to music and allowed me to have a success and a profession there that can apply over here to this new thing? So, and I didn't know what that was. So I thought about music, and I thought, okay, well, really it boils down to practice. Like your life in music, when I was a little kid, I read a book that was a collection of wisdom of, was called something like The World's Top 50 Concert Pianists, Interviews with.
Amazing.
Yep. And one of the standard questions was, how much do you practice? And I learned from that everybody's answer was 3 to 5 hours. And so I thought to myself at that time, I'm not a top pianist, so I should pick 5. And so I practiced 5 hours a day, come hell or high water, every single day, including Christmas. So I knew that if I could figure out what the equivalent of practice was in business, I could generally increase the odds of my success. And so that led me to start, anytime I met somebody that I admired, I would ask them, how do you spend your time in your business? And try to learn, from them. Much the same way that I had these master classes with established concert artists. I would call people up that I admired in the community. And, Calgary's such an amazing place. People would take my calls, and they took me seriously. Like where but Calgary could a piano player start saying, I'm an entrepreneur trying to buy a business, and people would just say, oh, okay, here's 5 leads. Any other place they would say, who the fuck are you? Right?
For sure.
And it was the same thing when I started calling, I just picked up the phone and tried to call, like I reached Rick George on the telephone. He was the CEO of Suncor at the time.
Wow.
And I just said, Mr. George, my name is Jeff Neufeld. I'm a young entrepreneur trying to figure out how to run a small business. Would you have breakfast with me and talk to me about what you actually do with your time? And like, that was so audacious. Like, what? Like, he might very easily have said, like, Jeff, I'm the CEO of a $50 billion market cap company. There's nothing I can tell you that is relevant to running a flashing shop.
Mm-hmm.
But he didn't.
Mm.
He said, oh, that's really interesting. Good for you. How did you get into that? Well, I was a concert pianist. Wow. And he met me and talked to me about,
Wow.
like what data he looked at every day and what was important to him.
Mm.
And I said, like, what do you do at 9 a.m. on Monday? And he told me. And so from that, I was able to build myself, what I refer to now as a core schedule, which is just sort of like my standard operating procedure as the leader of a business, so that I know what to do with my time to increase the odds of some positive outcomes.
It's brilliant. And it all maps back to all those years.
Yep. What's the equivalent of practice?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
What's been the most, all the skills you learned over all those years, what's been the biggest piece that you've taken into business? You touched on one thing that I was like, it's work ethic is seems like obviously a natural one to, the amount of work you put in. You talked about the scheduling and how to use your hours, which goes to work, but is there something else that's you've been able to kind of directly associate with your musical career?
Well, discipline has been a huge part of it. Often to my detriment. I'm very stubborn. And when I decide that I'm going to do something, I remember the industrial psychologist saying,
I was just gonna
I remember him
come up.
Yeah, I remember him saying, sometimes you are disciplined to your detriment. Like you don't need to be practicing at this stage. Like, do you realize that? Like, you have 5 concerts scheduled next year. You're good enough to go and just lay those down. It's repertoire that you've played 100 times over. You don't need to practice every day. Stop practicing. But I had decided I practice 5 hours a day. And so there's downside to, well, pretty well everything, but discipline, to answer your question, discipline has been a huge part of it.
Some interesting dots there.
Yeah.
It's obscure.
It's not, yeah. Yeah.
There's no way when you're traveling the world playing, to think about where you are right now. It's not within the realm of possibilities.
No, it's not. I think gratitude has been a learned quality that I have been forced by life to develop. I had tremendously high expectations of myself as a kid, and I was really devastated and bitter and resentful towards life for a long time when I didn't get to what I wanted to be as a pianist. Then I learned to pull my head out of my ass and start to be grateful for everything that I do have. that's really changed a lot in my life, like just to be able to see that, just to have gratitude for all the opportunity that I did have. I mean, I'm a kid from a non-music related background. Like I don't, nobody in my family played music professionally.
Mm-hmm.
I'm from Winnipeg. I'm not from Salzburg. And I got the chance to, play in some pretty big places. Like none of that should have happened. I'm just a kid from St. James, Manitoba.
Mm-hmm.
And I was never grateful for that until later on when, I realized what the odds are of any of that. And I feel that way now that, I'm in manufacturing. Like the odds are against you in a given day if you start your own or buy an existing manufacturing business.
Mm-hmm.
And I think having a mindset of gratitude and abundance has done a lot for me to just feel good in a given day.
Mm-hmm.
And when I can feel good in a given day, again, that really increases the odds that I'm going to do something productive and helpful and useful and profitable.
That just kind of takes the edge off a little, hey?
Yeah.
Like you can think like that.
Yep.
It just
Absolutely.
And I think it opens you up to interest in different opportunities too, right? Like you're just more willing, you're more open in space, and I think it just more things start to come your way.
Yep.
Where does music fit in your life right now?
I didn't touch an instrument for a good 10 years.
Wow.
I didn't like to play badly.
Mm.
And, you have to practice to play well. And I didn't want to practice without any purpose to it. It was really lovely to have all that time back in my life for a while. I've gotten involved as a board member with some music presenting organizations. I've started going to concerts a little bit. Sometimes I'll listen to music. Sometimes in the last year or two, I've even sat down at the piano and played a little bit. And that was kind of funny. I had a little experience maybe 2 months ago where I started playing some Chopin preludes, and my son walks by. He's 8, and he goes, "Hey, Dad, you're pretty good at the piano." And I said, I actually used to do this for a living. And he goes, "No way, that's cool." And like walked on, right? Left the room. And
Because in 8 years of his life, he's never seen you play. He's never heard you play.
Not really.
Because you haven't done it.
Not really. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. My wife's the same way. She was a violinist, and I don't remember the last time that she pulled out a violin.
Well,
I haven't seen her fiddle in a long time. Yeah.
just call it cold turkey. It's just like,
Yep.
done.
Yep. But
That, yeah. Your son saying that to you is like...
Yep. I remember talking to Tyler about, do you play beer league or anything?
Yeah.
And I think he does a little now, but he said at first he didn't because he was worried he was going to kill somebody. And, I totally related to that. I was such a snob about, thinking of myself as this elite high-end performer that, I couldn't be bothered to go to anything local or like take any small gigs or anything like that to stay involved.
It's below you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think that way anymore. And I think that's probably what's allowed me to sit down and just enjoy the instrument, and I don't know if I'll ever play publicly again. But I think I'm open to that possibility now.
Yeah, it seems like you're in a way different headspace, obviously.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
just running your own business. You know,
Yeah.
that industrial psychologist.
Yeah,
Was he right?
absolutely.
This fits.
I love it. So I worked in the business. I mean, I was certainly not thinking about leadership on day one. You know, there was too much to do.
Yep.
I hired the old owner to run the business while I got my head around what we actually did and how we did it. And so I did things like worked on the sales desk. Then I drove the truck. I learned to operate a shear. I operated the brake. You know, not to any professional degree. No one was worried about losing their jobs. But I did think it was important to understand how we actually made things. And then that led me to doing some things like I went to the U of C, like business school at night kind of thing, studying things such as management accounting, you know, small business development courses, all those kinds of things to just make myself competent. And then, of course, by the time I managed to make myself competent, I discovered that it would actually be way faster to hire people that were truly great at things that I was only okay at and only somewhat enjoyed. And then it took a few years to hire those people and get out of their way. And then I discovered that, of course, leading a business is a full-time job as well. And I didn't know what a CEO actually did or how to do any of that. And so then I had to start figuring that out. So again, I picked up the phone and called people whose work history and life history I admired and asked if they would be willing to help me.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And they said,
so that, yeah,
got
that,
some yeses.
Yeah, that led me, in particular, I mean, there have been many. Lots of people from the Calgary community have given me plenty of time and education. You know, two people are a guy named Brian McGill has been critical in my leadership education. You know, Brian, I met when he taught at the U of C night school in a business management class. Then I spent a lot of time with a guy named Kim McConnell, who works in agriculture advertising. Kim I met through an organization called the Canadian Youth Business Foundation. He's been critical in my education as a leader. And then for the last few years, I've enjoyed the privilege of working with a retired U.S. CEO by the name of Warren Rustand. And Warren Rustand has been, again, incredibly generous with his time and experiences in just helping me to understand, you know, what to do is as if you were lucky enough to put yourself in the position of business leader.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It's very clear to me now why Sloaner suggested to get you on the show.
Well, that's good.
I feel like you two could have some chats. Just your just your experiences and even your mannerisms and your tones. They're very similar.
Yeah.
So it's been a cool experience to have you here and actually like hear this.
Well, we've both been through a very wonderful yet humbling path. Hey.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been really cool.
Yeah.
I end the show with one question. When I say Calgary, where's your head go?
Opportunity. You know, I love this place. You know, it's just, you know, like if Calgary had a telephone number that I could call, I would call Calgary and I would just say, thank you for everything. What can I do for you?
Amazing.
Yep.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me.
That's all my pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. What a cool experience this was, Jeff. You know, I haven't really told any of those stories, and or spent a lot of time thinking about all this. And that was a nice gift that you gave me by asking me to come and talk with you.
Yeah, I'm glad you said yes.
Yeah.
Thanks again.
Cool. Thank you.